Sometimes the hardest thing for a good man to face is not that someone lied to him, but that he kept trying to love them honestly after the truth was already clear. It is deeply painful when trust gets broken again and again by people who take comfort, loyalty, and patience as if those things are cheap. Tonight's stories live inside that exhausting place where betrayal keeps showing up, where fear keeps telling the writers to stay, and where self-respect has to be rebuilt one hard choice at a time. Somewhere ahead in this compilation, one writer will cross an ocean for love and walk straight into heartbreak, and another will realize that the real turning point is not catching the lie, but finally refusing to carry it anymore. That is what makes these stories hit so hard, because the damage is not only in the cheating, it is in the slow way unfair treatment teaches people to doubt their own worth. But peace is coming, boundaries are coming, and that quiet moment where a person finally chooses himself is coming too. So let us settle in and read the very first story together. I found out my girlfriend was sleeping with my coworker right before my promotion, and I still stayed. I found out about Emily and Marcus at around 10:30 in the morning, right as I was about to walk into the biggest meeting of my life, the one that was supposed to lock in my promotion and finally pull me out of barely scraping by. I wasn't even snooping, which almost makes it worse, because it means the universe just decided to drop it in my lap. Emily had left her tablet at home, and it lit up with a message while I was grabbing my keys, Marcus's name right there, and preview text that made my stomach fold in on itself. He wrote that he couldn't stop thinking about last night and asked if she missed him already. Marcus, as in Marcus from my team, the guy who shook my hand every morning and joked about grabbing beers after work. I stood there frozen while another message came through, this one from Emily, telling him she wished she'd called in sick so they could stay in bed longer. I remember checking the time again like it would somehow change what I was seeing, like 10:30 in the morning might rewind itself if I stared hard enough. I should have confronted her right then, should have stormed into the office and dragged Marcus into a conference room and ended both of them, professionally and personally, but instead I just drove to work in silence with this buzzing in my ears like I'd been hit too hard. During the meeting, while my boss Daniel talked about leadership and trust and the future of the company, all I could think about was how I'd been sharing a bed and a bank account with someone who was actively choosing someone else, and worse, someone I had to see every single day. The promotion still came through at around 1 in the afternoon, everyone clapping, Marcus even patting me on the back like we weren't living in two completely different realities, and I smiled through it because I didn't know what else to do. That night at about 8 o'clock, I confronted Emily in our apartment, my voice shaking more than I wanted it to, and she didn't even deny it at first, just stared at me like she'd been caught speeding instead of betraying me. Then came the tears, the apologies, the excuses about stress and feeling disconnected, and how it didn't mean anything. I wish I could say I left right then, but I didn't because we had a joint account, shared rent, shared everything, and the idea of blowing that up right after finally getting ahead at work felt like jumping off a cliff with no ground in sight. I told her we could try to fix it, which felt like lying to myself even as I said it. For a few weeks, things were calm, almost disturbingly normal, like we were both pretending we hadn't just detonated something fundamental. She blocked Marcus, or at least she said she did, and I threw myself into my new role, working late, trying to prove I deserved it, trying to outrun the constant replay in my head. But the problem with betrayal is that it doesn't stay buried, it leaks out in small ways, like how she started guarding her phone more, how she'd step into the bathroom to answer messages, how Marcus suddenly became overly formal with me at work, like we were strangers instead of guys who used to joke around. The second time I caught them, it was around 11:15 at night, about 2 months later, when Emily said she was going to stay over at her friend Sarah's place after a fight we'd had about money. I didn't believe her, not really, so I drove past Marcus's apartment, and her car was parked right outside. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at it, feeling something inside me finally crack in a way that was quieter but deeper than the first time. When she came home the next morning at around 9, she tried to spin it again. More apologies, more promises, and somehow I still stayed, because leaving meant unraveling everything, the apartment, the finances, the version of my life I had built, and I was scared of what I'd be without it. That became the cycle: discovery, confrontation, temporary peace, then another betrayal, each time chipping away at whatever self-respect I had left. At work, Marcus eventually transferred to another department, but the damage didn't leave with him. It just changed shape, turning into this constant paranoia that anyone she talked to could become the next version of him. The midpoint for me, though I didn't call it that at the time, came one evening around 6 when I checked our bank account and realized she had been siphoning money out for months, small amounts at first, then bigger ones, funding hotel stays and gifts and a version of her life that had nothing to do with me. It wasn't just emotional betrayal anymore, it was practical, tangible, something that threatened my ability to stand on my own. That was the moment I stopped reacting and started planning. I opened a new account in my name only, rerouted my paycheck, and quietly began separating everything piece by piece while pretending nothing had changed. The final blow came at around midnight a few weeks later, when she forgot to log out of her email on my laptop, and I saw messages not just to Marcus but to someone else entirely, a guy named Jason, proof that this wasn't about one mistake or one bad decision. It was a pattern, and I was just the constant she relied on to keep her life stable while she did whatever she wanted. I confronted her one last time, no yelling this time, no shaking voice, just a flat statement that I was done and that I knew about everything. And for once, she didn't have anything to say that could twist it back into something survivable. The breakup was messy, financially and emotionally, but I didn't back down, even when she cried, even when she tried to remind me of the years we'd spent together, because I finally understood that staying was costing me more than leaving ever could. The months after were rough in a different way, quieter but heavier, like I had to relearn how to exist without constantly second-guessing myself. I focused on work, on rebuilding my savings, on just getting through each day without replaying everything. Then around 7 in the evening one random Thursday, I met Hannah at a small work networking event I almost skipped. She wasn't dramatic or overwhelming, just steady in a way that felt unfamiliar at first, asking questions and actually listening, showing up when she said she would, never making me feel like I had to compete for basic respect. The first time she left her phone on the table and walked away without a second thought, it hit me how much tension I'd been carrying for so long. Being with her didn't feel like a roller coaster, it felt like solid ground, and that scared me at first because I didn't trust it. But over time, that steadiness became something I realized I deserved all along. Looking back now, I don't just regret Emily's betrayals. I regret how long I convinced myself they were something I had to tolerate, how I kept choosing fear of being alone over my own dignity. Losing that relationship hurt, but losing myself in it was worse, and rebuilding that sense of self has been the hardest part, but also the most important. I still think about those mornings and nights sometimes, about the messages, the lies, the version of me who stayed, but it doesn't control me anymore. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm actually living a life that's mine instead of just surviving one that was. Emily and Marcus did not just break trust, they kept turning pain into a routine, and that is what made the writer's decision to finally walk away feel so necessary. Every excuse they gave fell apart because their pattern was never about one mistake, it was about a choice to keep hurting someone who was trying to hold the whole thing together. The writer stayed long enough to see the truth clearly, and that took more strength than people usually admit. What makes that ending hit so hard is how quietly the writer rebuilt his life after being pushed to the edge. And now we move into another story where betrayal is not private at all, because this time the whole world gets to see the shame before the writer even has a chance to breathe. Let us read the next story together. I found my girlfriend in a viral cheating post, and still stayed until it broke me. I knew something was wrong the moment my phone started buzzing like it was about to explode around 9 in the evening, and when I finally checked it, I saw my friend Marcus had sent me a link with just 3 words, "Bro, is this?" and I already felt my stomach drop before I even tapped it. The post was everywhere, some local gossip page that thrives on exposing messy relationships, and right there in the center was a video of my girlfriend, Alyssa, laughing and leaning into some guy I had never seen before while he kissed her like they had done it 100 times. And the caption spelled it out with names and everything, tagging her, tagging him, tagging me like I was part of some joke the entire city was laughing at. I watched it again and again, trying to find some angle that made it less real, some explanation that would make it hurt less, but there was none, just her face clear as day, smiling in a way I had not seen in months, and that somehow hurt more than the cheating itself. Within minutes my phone filled with messages from people I barely even talked to anymore. Guys from high school, co-workers, even my cousin Daniel asking if I was okay. And that was the part that made it unbearable because it was not just betrayal, it was public humiliation, like my entire relationship had been turned into content for strangers. When Alyssa finally called me around 9:30, her voice was shaky but not broken, And she said it was not what it looked like, that the video was old, that she had made a mistake, that she loved me. And I wanted to hang up so badly, but I did not because the idea of starting over felt heavier than the pain I was already in. I told her to come over, and when she walked in around 10:15, she immediately started crying, grabbing my hands, repeating my name like if she said it enough times it would undo everything, and I just stood there numb, asking her one question over and over, how long, until she finally admitted it had been going on for weeks. I should have ended it right there, any sane person would have, but instead I told her we could try to fix it, and even as the words left my mouth, I felt something inside me crack in a way I could not explain. The next few weeks were a blur of forced normalcy. We deleted social media, avoided going out, and she did everything right on the surface, sharing her location, texting constantly, acting like the perfect partner, but none of it erased the image burned into my head or the fact that everyone had seen it too, and every time my phone buzzed I felt that same wave of dread like I was about to be exposed again. Marcus told me straight up one night around 8 that I was making a mistake, that staying was only going to drag it out, but I brushed him off because leaving meant admitting that everything we built was gone, and I was not ready to face that. For a while I convinced myself it was getting better, that we were stronger, that maybe hitting rock bottom had forced us to rebuild something real, but deep down I knew I was just ignoring the obvious because it was easier than being alone. Then came the second time, and somehow it was worse because there was no shock left, just this cold, heavy confirmation that I had been lying to myself. It happened on a random Thursday around 7 in the evening when I got another message, this time from a coworker named Jenna who I barely spoke to, and she sent me a screenshot from a different page, another post, another video, and there was Alyssa again, different guy, same smile, same energy, like I had never existed in her world at all. I did not even feel anger at first, just this hollow emptiness, like everything inside me had been scooped out and replaced with nothing, and when she walked through the door later that night, I did not yell or argue. I just showed her the screenshot and watched her face fall in a way that told me everything I needed to know. She tried the same script, the apologies, the promises, the tears, but it sounded rehearsed this time, like even she did not believe it anymore, and that was the moment something shifted in me because I realized I was not staying out of love, I was staying out of fear. Fear of being alone, fear of starting over, fear that maybe this was the best I could do, and saying that out loud even in my own head made me feel worse than anything she had done. So I told her it was over, just like that, no big speech, no drama, just a quiet decision that felt heavier than anything I had ever said before. And she cried and begged and tried to hold on to me, but I stepped back because I knew if I let her pull me in even a little I would stay again, and I could not survive another cycle of that. The aftermath was messy in a different way, not public this time but internal, because without the constant chaos of the relationship I was left alone with my thoughts, replaying everything, questioning my own worth, wondering why I stayed as long as I did, and there were nights around 11 when I would just sit there staring at nothing, feeling like I had wasted a part of my life I could not get back. Marcus stuck by me through it, dragging me out of the apartment, forcing me to remember what it felt like to exist outside of that relationship, and slowly things started to shift, not all at once but enough for me to notice that I was not checking my phone every 5 minutes anymore, or replaying those videos in my head as often. Months passed, and somewhere along the way I met someone new. Her name was Leela, and it was not some dramatic moment, just a normal conversation that felt easy in a way I had forgotten was possible, and that alone made me cautious because I did not trust easy anymore. I took things slow, probably slower than she wanted at times, but she never pushed, never made me feel like I had to prove anything, and the first time I told her about Alyssa and everything that happened, she did not try to fix it or dismiss it, she just listened, and that meant more than I expected. The difference was not in grand gestures or constant reassurance. It was in consistency, in the absence of chaos, in the way I did not feel like I was waiting for something to go wrong all the time. And that is when it hit me that love is not supposed to feel like survival. One night around 9, as we sat talking about nothing important, I realized I had not thought about those viral posts in weeks. And that felt like a bigger victory than anything else, because it meant I was finally letting go of that version of myself who thought he had to endure betrayal just to avoid being alone. Alyssa tried reaching out a few times after everything, messages here and there, apologies that came too late, but I never responded because there was nothing left to say. And for the first time I understood that walking away was not losing, it was choosing myself. Looking back now, the worst part was never the videos or the public exposure. It was how long I stayed after knowing the truth, how I convinced myself that pain was something I had to tolerate to keep someone in my life, and unlearning that has been harder than anything else, but also the most important thing I have ever done. Alyssa's lies were cruel enough in private, but putting that betrayal out in the open made the pain even harder to carry. The writer was trapped between humiliation and fear, and that is exactly why it took so long for him to let go. But the turning point came when he finally saw that staying was not love anymore, it was fear wearing love's clothes. That choice mattered because it showed him that peace does not come from begging someone to change, it comes from refusing to keep living inside their damage. And now we step into a story where a future house and a shared dream get stained by the same kind of betrayal, only this time the wound reaches into every room. Let us read the next story together. Shared dreams don't survive lies. I found them in the kitchen of the house we were supposed to buy, her hands on Daniel's chest, his mouth on her neck, standing right where we had argued about cabinet colors a week earlier. The front door was still unlocked because we had just finished a viewing with the agent, and I had run back in to grab my jacket. It was late afternoon, around 5:30, sunlight cutting through the empty rooms and hitting them like a spotlight. I remember thinking for a split second that maybe I had walked into the wrong place, like my brain refused to accept that the future I had been building was already rotting from the inside. "Ethan," she said, pulling away, breath shaky, eyes wide, like I was the one who had done something wrong by showing up. Daniel didn't even look ashamed, just adjusted his shirt and gave me that tight smile he always used when he beat me at something. I stood there holding my jacket like an idiot, trying to connect the version of Mia I loved with the one standing in front of me, and I couldn't make them line up. "It's not what it looks like," she said, which was such a stupid sentence in that moment that it almost made me laugh, but I didn't laugh. I just nodded, because something inside me had already decided to stay, and I hate admitting that more than anything else in this story. I wish I could say I walked out right then, slammed the door, cut her off, respected myself, all that clean dramatic stuff, but the truth is I asked her to explain, and she did, and I accepted it even though every part of me knew it was garbage. She told me she was scared about the house, about the commitment, about us moving too fast, and Daniel was just someone she talked to, someone who understood her doubts. I wanted to believe that so badly that I convinced myself the kissing was just a mistake, a moment of weakness. We still signed the papers a week later. I moved in with her and we painted those cabinets together like nothing had happened. For a while it almost felt normal again. We had routines, dinners, lazy Sundays, late night talks about the future. I told myself that people mess up and relationships survive worse. But the house never felt like home to me after that. Every room had this quiet echo of what I saw that day. The kitchen especially. I avoided standing in that exact spot like it was cursed. The second time I caught her, it was around 11 at night, 3 months later. She said she was going out with friends, and I stayed home watching some dumb show, trying not to overthink. Around 10:30, I had this feeling in my gut that I couldn't shake, so I drove to the bar she mentioned. She wasn't there. I called her, no answer. I checked her location because we shared it, and she was back at the house. I remember my hands shaking on the steering wheel as I drove back, telling myself there was a reasonable explanation, that I was being paranoid. I walked in, and the house was dark except for the bedroom light. I already knew before I opened the door. This time it was Daniel. It was Marcus, a co-worker she had told me not to worry about. Same scene, different guy, same look on her face when she saw me. Shock then annoyance, like I was interrupting something important. I didn't yell, I didn't even say much. I just stood there and felt something inside me collapse in a way that felt permanent. "You weren't supposed to be back yet," she said, which somehow hurt more than anything else. Not sorry, not guilt, just inconvenience. That should have been the end. Anyone with a spine would have ended it right there, packed their things and left, but I stayed again. Not because I forgave her, but because I didn't think I had anything else. That house was tied up in my savings, my plans, my identity. Leaving felt like losing everything, not just her. I told myself I could fix it, that if I was better, more attentive, less boring, she wouldn't need anyone else. It sounds pathetic because it was. The next few months were a cycle. Suspicion, confrontation, tears, promises, temporary calm, then another crack. Sometimes I found messages. Sometimes I caught little inconsistencies that she couldn't explain. Once I came home early around 7 in the evening and saw a car I didn't recognize parked down the street, engine still warm when I walked past it. I didn't even go inside right away. I just stood there on the sidewalk, staring at my own house like it belonged to someone else, knowing exactly what I would find if I opened the door. That was the moment something shifted. Not all at once, but enough. I realized I wasn't staying because I loved her anymore. I was staying because I was afraid to be alone and afraid to admit I had built my life on something that wasn't real. So I went inside, confirmed what I already knew, and this time I didn't argue. I didn't ask questions. I just walked into the bedroom, grabbed a bag, and started packing. She followed me around, talking, justifying, blaming me in subtle ways, saying I had changed, saying she felt neglected, saying she didn't know how to tell me. I didn't engage. Around 8:30, I walked out of that house with a duffel bag and no real plan. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but also the first time in a long time that I felt something close to clarity. The weeks after were rough. I stayed with my friend Caleb, slept on his couch, went to work, came back, and tried not to think about how much time and energy I had poured into something that ended like that. There were moments where I almost went back, where I missed the familiarity, even the chaos. But every time I pictured that kitchen, that bedroom, those moments replayed so clearly that it stopped me. Slowly, things started to shift. I focused on small stuff, getting my own place even if it was tiny, cooking for myself, going to the gym, reconnecting with people I had drifted from. It wasn't some dramatic transformation. It was boring, steady, and honestly kind of lonely. Then I met Lena. It wasn't some cinematic moment. We met at a bookstore on a Saturday afternoon around 2:15, both reaching for the same book and doing that awkward half laugh. She was straightforward in a way that caught me off guard. No games, no mixed signals. We talked, exchanged numbers, and started seeing each other casually. I didn't tell her everything right away, but I didn't lie either. When I did open up, she didn't try to fix me or give me speeches. She just listened and responded like a normal, grounded person. The biggest difference was consistency. If she said she'd be somewhere, she was there. If something bothered her, she said it directly. There were no hidden layers, no guessing games. Over time, that started to feel safe instead of boring. About 6 months in, we went to look at houses, not because we were rushing into anything, but because we both liked the idea of building something intentional. Walking into those spaces felt different this time. There was no shadow of betrayal attached to it, just possibility. One afternoon around 4, we stood in a kitchen of a place we both liked, and she asked me what I thought about the layout. I realized I wasn't thinking about the past at all. I was just there, present, imagining a future that didn't feel fragile. I told her I liked it, and she smiled, not in a way that made me feel like I had to prove something, just genuine. That's when it really hit me. The dreams didn't fail because dreaming was stupid. They failed because I built them with someone who didn't respect them or me. With Lena, it wasn't about clinging to a future out of fear. It was about choosing it because it actually made sense. I didn't need to convince myself this time. It just felt right, steady, and real, which is something I didn't even know I was missing before everything fell apart. Mia and Daniel turned a home that should have felt hopeful into a place full of pain, and that made the writer's final decision feel overdue in the deepest way. He kept trying to save something that had already been cracked by lies, but in the end he saw that love cannot survive when respect is gone. That moment of clarity was hard won, and it mattered because he stopped making excuses for behavior that was never kind to begin with. His choice to leave was not just about walking out of a house, it was about walking out of a false future. And now we come to a story where the same heartbreak repeats so many times that the writer finally has no choice but to choose himself for good. Let us read the next story together. The 5th time I caught Sarah cheating was the night I finally chose myself. I was sitting in my car outside Daniel's apartment at around 11 at night when Sarah texted me that she was at her sister's place and might stay over. And I remember staring at that message with this weird numb calm because Daniel's car was right in front of me, and I had already seen her walk inside 10 minutes earlier like she had done it 100 times before, like I had never learned anything from the first 4 times I caught her. The first time was almost gentle, if cheating can ever be that. Just a flirty thread on her phone with a guy named Marcus that turned into a couple of late-night meetups she swore were nothing. And I believed her because she cried so hard I thought her chest might cave in. And she kept saying my name like I was the only person who could save her from herself. So I took her back and told myself love meant forgiveness. The second time was worse. A full-blown weekend she said was a work trip, but turned out to be a hotel with someone named Lewis. And when I confronted her, she dropped to the floor of our kitchen around 6 in the evening and begged me not to leave. Promising therapy, promising transparency, promising she would never lie again. And I wanted to believe her so badly that I ignored the part of me that was already exhausted. The third time was humiliating because it wasn't hidden at all. It was a coworker named Aidan who would text her right in front of me. and when I called it out, she somehow twisted it into me being insecure. And I actually apologized to her before she broke down again and admitted it and said she was lost and needed me to anchor her. And I stayed because I thought maybe loving her harder would fix whatever kept breaking inside her. The fourth time was the one that should have ended it. A random guy she met on a night out. No name I even remember, just a blurry photo someone sent me at around 2 in the morning of her kissing him outside a bar. And when I showed her, she didn't even deny it at first. She just went quiet and then started crying again. Telling me she hated herself, telling me she didn't deserve me, telling me I was the only good thing in her life. And somehow that line hooked me because I wanted to be that for someone. I wanted to matter enough that they would change. So I took her back again and told myself this was the last chance. By the time I was outside Daniel's apartment that night, I knew exactly how this would go. And that was the part that finally made something in me snap, because it wasn't even about catching her anymore. It was about realizing I had become part of the pattern, like I was enabling my own heartbreak on repeat. I sat there until around midnight, watching the lights in his place flicker on and off, imagining her inside laughing the same way she used to laugh with me. And I felt this heavy, suffocating mix of anger and shame, because I had accepted this version of my life where I was always the guy waiting in the car, always the guy piecing together lies. When she finally came out a little after 1 in the morning, she froze when she saw me, and for a second I saw pure panic on her face before it melted into that familiar script, the tears, the trembling voice, the way she said my name like it was sacred. And she started walking toward me, already apologizing, already explaining, already rewriting reality in a way that would make it easier for me to forgive her again. I got out of the car, and for once I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask questions. I didn't even feel the urge to argue. I just looked at her and realized I knew every word she was about to say, every promise she was about to make, and every way she would eventually break it. And that predictability was more painful than any single betrayal because it meant nothing was ever going to change. She kept talking, saying this was a mistake, saying she was scared of losing me, saying she would do anything to fix it. And I remember interrupting her and asking one simple thing. I asked her to tell me how this time was different from the last 4, and she opened her mouth but nothing came out. And in that silence, everything finally became undeniable. I told her I was done, and she tried to grab my arm, but I stepped back. And that small movement felt like the hardest and most important thing I had ever done. Like I was physically pulling myself out of a loop I had been stuck in for years. The days after that were brutal, not because I doubted my decision, but because I had to sit with everything I had ignored, every red flag, every excuse, every moment I chose hope over reality. And it hurt in a way that was deeper than the cheating itself, because it forced me to confront how little I had valued myself. I stopped answering her calls, even when they came in at 3 in the morning, even when her messages got desperate, even when she showed up at my door crying like she always did, because I knew if I opened that door I would be stepping back into the same cycle, and I couldn't survive another round of it. It took months before the noise in my head quieted down, before I stopped replaying everything, before I stopped wondering if she would have changed this time. And during that stretch, I focused on rebuilding some version of myself that didn't revolve around fixing someone else. I started seeing friends I had neglected. I got back into the gym. I even cut down on the nights I would just sit around getting high on Tsar and overthinking everything. And slowly I started to feel like a person again, instead of just someone reacting to constant damage. I met Emma on a random afternoon around 4 at a coffee shop when she accidentally took my order. And instead of it turning into some dramatic moment, it was just simple and normal and easy. And that alone felt unfamiliar in the best way. What stood out about Emma wasn't some grand gesture or intense chemistry. It was consistency. She said she would call and she called. She made plans and she kept them. She told the truth even when it was uncomfortable. And at first I found myself waiting for the catch, waiting for the moment everything would flip like it always had before, but it never came. There was one night around 9 when she told me she would be out late with friends. And I felt that old anxiety creeping in, that instinct to check, to doubt, to brace for impact. But she sent me a simple message later saying she got home safe and hoped I was having a good night. And that was it. No drama, no lies, no hidden layers, just honesty. And it hit me how different that felt from everything I had normalized before. Being with Emma didn't feel like a roller coaster. It felt steady. And I realized that what I used to call passion was often just instability dressed up as something exciting. The biggest shift wasn't even about her though. It was about me finally understanding that love isn't supposed to be something you have to constantly fight to keep alive, while the other person keeps setting it on fire. It's supposed to be something that grows because both people protect it. The night I saw Sarah outside Daniel's apartment was the last time I ignored what was right in front of me, and walking away from her wasn't just leaving a relationship. It was breaking a pattern I had allowed to define me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't just hoping things would be different. I was actually choosing something better. Sarah kept asking for one more chance, but what she really offered was the same hurt dressed up in a softer voice. The writer stayed through 4 betrayals, and that kind of endurance can wear a person down until he stops seeing his own worth clearly. But on that final night, he saw the pattern for what it was, and that gave him the strength to step back. That was a hard and honest moment, because sometimes the most loving thing a man can do is stop giving someone access to his heart when they keep using it carelessly. And now the next story takes us deeper into that same ache, where the writer realizes he was not too hard to love, he was just loving the wrong person. Let us read the next story together. The night I realized I wasn't hard to love, I was just loving the wrong person. I was sitting in my car outside Melissa's apartment at a little past 10 at night when I saw her laugh like that again, head thrown back, hand on some guy's chest like it belonged there. And I remember thinking not even anger this time, just this hollow, familiar drop in my stomach like I had stepped off something I knew was unstable, but kept standing on anyway. I didn't go in right away, because part of me was already rehearsing the excuse I would accept, the same way I had every other time. And that's the part that makes me feel the worst now, not what she did, but how ready I was to forgive it before she even noticed me. I had been with Melissa for 3 years, and if I listed everything out, it would sound insane like I'm talking about someone else's life, but it was mine, and I kept choosing it every single day. The first time she cheated, she cried so hard she could barely speak, and I held her while she apologized, and told me she felt broken, and I told her I understood, and we could fix it together. The second time she didn't cry, she just said it was a mistake, and I believed her because I wanted to. By the third time, I stopped asking questions, because I already knew the answers, and asking made it real in a way ignoring it didn't. That's what I mean about repetition. It wasn't just her betraying me, it was me betraying myself over and over, until it felt normal. So I sat there in that car watching her through the window like some creep, and I told myself maybe it's just a friend, maybe I'm overthinking again, even though I knew exactly what I was looking at. When I finally went up, she opened the door like nothing was wrong, and introduced me to Jason like I was the one interrupting something casual and harmless. And I shook his hand because I didn't know what else to do, and he looked at me with this weird mix of confusion and pity that made everything click into place in a way it never had before. He didn't know about me, not really, and that meant Melissa had been living an entirely different version of her life with him. That realization hit harder than anything else, because it meant I wasn't even important enough to be the problem, I was just background noise she could mute whenever it suited her. I waited until he left around 11:30, and she tried to act normal again, asking me why I looked so tense like I was the one bringing bad energy into the room, and something in me finally snapped, not loud, not dramatic, just a clean break like a rope that had been fraying for years finally giving out. I asked her straight up how long, and she rolled her eyes before even answering, and said it didn't matter because it wasn't serious, and that was the moment everything shifted, because I realized she genuinely believed that was a reasonable answer. I remember laughing, which felt insane even as I was doing it, and telling her I think the worst part is I actually believed this is what I deserved, and she didn't even react to that, she just shrugged like she was bored of the conversation. That's when I left, not after a fight, not after some big emotional scene, just a quiet decision that I was done negotiating my own worth down to something she could tolerate. Walking out of that apartment felt weirdly calm, like I had been bracing for a storm that never came, because the damage had already been done long before that night. The next few weeks were rough in a way that's hard to explain, because I wasn't just missing her, I was missing the version of myself that thought staying was the right thing to do. I kept replaying everything, trying to pinpoint when I started believing I wasn't worth basic loyalty and respect, and I couldn't find a single moment. It was more like a slow adjustment over time, until it became my baseline. I stopped seeing friends as much because I didn't want to explain why I was still with her. I stopped talking about my relationship at all, because saying it out loud made it sound as bad as it was, and I wasn't ready to face that. Then about 2 months later, I met Sarah at a friend's birthday thing around 8 in the evening, and I almost didn't go because I was still in that headspace where everything felt like too much effort, but I'm glad I did, because she changed something in me just by being normal in a way I had forgotten existed. She asked me questions, and actually listened to the answers. She laughed at my dumb jokes, without making me feel like I was performing for approval, and when I mentioned my ex, she didn't pry or judge, she just said that sounds like it was really hard and left it at that. It sounds small, but that level of basic respect hit me harder than any apology Melissa had ever given me. We started hanging out more, and I kept waiting for the catch, for the moment where things would start to feel familiar in that bad way, but it never came. Instead, Sarah was consistent in a way that almost made me uncomfortable at first, like I didn't know how to relax into something that wasn't constantly on the verge of falling apart. The real turning point happened one night around 9 when we were cooking at her place, and I accidentally dropped a glass, and it shattered everywhere, and I immediately started apologizing like I had done something unforgivable, and she just laughed softly and said, "Hey, it's just a glass, we'll clean it up," and she grabbed a broom without making it a big deal. That's when it hit me in a way nothing else had, because I realized I had been living in a state of constant tension for years, expecting every small mistake to turn into a problem I had to fix or apologize for. I actually had to step into the bathroom for a minute, because it was overwhelming realizing how different things could be. Being with Sarah didn't just feel better, it forced me to confront how much I had been accepting before, and that part hurt in a deeper way, because it meant I had played a role in my own unhappiness by refusing to walk away sooner. I told her everything eventually, not all at once, but enough for her to understand where I was coming from, and she never made me feel stupid for staying as long as I did, but she also never pretended it was okay either. She told me you don't get extra points for enduring things that break you, and that stuck with me, because it reframed everything I thought I knew about loyalty and love. Looking back now, that night outside Melissa's apartment feels like the moment I finally saw my life clearly for what it was instead of what I kept telling myself it could be. It wasn't about catching her again, it was about realizing I had been complicit in lowering my own standards to match someone who was never going to meet them. Meeting Sarah didn't fix me or magically erase all that damage, but it gave me a reference point for what real care looks like, and once you see that, it's impossible to unsee. I still think about how long I stayed, and yeah, there's regret there, but there's also this weird sense of relief, because at least I didn't stay forever. That final incident didn't just end a relationship, it broke the belief that I was only worth the bare minimum, and that's something I don't think I could ever go back to even if I tried. Melissa kept turning the same wound over and over, until the writer could finally see that the real damage was not just her cheating, it was how long he had been taught himself to accept less. That kind of pain makes a man second-guess his own voice, but his last choice was finally honest and clean. He stopped trying to earn basic loyalty from someone who had already shown him she would not give it. That made room for the steadier kind of care he later found with Sarah, and that lesson carries straight into the next story. This next one is about public shame, quiet shrinking, and the hard moment when a man realizes he has been standing in the wrong place for too long. Let us read the next story together. I watched my girlfriend humiliate me in front of everyone, and still stayed. I knew something was wrong the second I saw Marcus's hand on Olivia's waist, but I kept walking like an idiot anyway, weaving through the crowd at Daniel's birthday party, while my chest tightened so hard I thought I might actually pass out right there on the sticky living room floor. It was around 9:15 at night, music loud enough to rattle the windows, people packed shoulder to shoulder, and there she was, my girlfriend of 2 years, laughing with her head tilted back like I wasn't even in the same building, like I didn't exist. I stopped a few feet away, waiting for her to notice me, because that's what normal couples do, right? They look for each other in rooms like that, but she didn't. Marcus leaned in, said something into her ear, and she didn't pull away. She smiled, then she kissed him. Not quick, not drunk sloppy, but slow and deliberate, like it meant something. And the worst part was people saw me watching. I heard someone behind me mutter, "Damn, that's cold." And instead of turning around or leaving or doing literally anything with dignity, I just stood there like I deserved it. Olivia finally noticed me when I stepped closer and said her name, and she didn't even look embarrassed. She rolled her eyes like I was interrupting her. "Ethan, seriously," she said like I was the problem. Marcus didn't even step back. He just looked at me like I was some inconvenience, like a guy who showed up to the wrong party. I asked her what the hell she was doing, my voice shaking in a way I couldn't control, and she laughed, actually laughed, then said, "You're making a scene." I remember that part clearly because it stuck in my head for months after. You're making a scene. Not her cheating on me in a room full of people, not her kissing another guy in front of everyone but me reacting to it. I should have left right then. I didn't, I stayed. I stood there while she grabbed my arm and dragged me toward the kitchen, like she was managing a child throwing a tantrum. And when we were alone, she told me it wasn't a big deal and that I was overreacting. I remember nodding, actually nodding, because somewhere in my head I had already decided I didn't deserve better than whatever this was. That night set the tone for everything that followed. It didn't stop. It just got quieter, more private, more controlled. She stopped doing things in front of crowds, but the disrespect never left. I'd catch texts from guys like Marcus, late-night messages she said were just jokes, and every time I confronted her, she'd flip it around on me. "Why are you always so insecure? Do you not trust me? You're exhausting." And somehow, every argument ended with me apologizing, me promising to do better, me convincing myself that if I just became less needy, less emotional, less me, she'd finally treat me like someone worth respecting. I started shrinking without realizing it. I stopped hanging out with friends because she said they were a bad influence. I stopped going to the gym because she liked me softer. I even stopped calling my sister Rachel, as often because Olivia said she didn't like how Rachel judged her. My world got smaller and smaller until it was basically just her, and whatever version of me she tolerated that day. The second time she humiliated me publicly was worse, because I saw it coming and still walked straight into it. It was at a bar around 11 o'clock at night, one of her co-worker-esque going away things. I showed up late because she told me not to come until she texted me, which should have been a red flag on its own. When I walked in, I saw her sitting on a guy's lap. His name was Jard. I knew that because she had mentioned him before in that casual way people do when they're already too comfortable with someone else. She didn't get up when she saw me. She didn't even look surprised. She just smiled like everything was normal and said, "Oh, you made it." I felt that same hollow drop in my stomach, that same burning mix of anger and shame, but instead of walking out, I forced a smile and joined them. I shook Jard's hand. I introduced myself like a complete joke. That night I laughed at stories that made me feel like I was disappearing, like I was being slowly erased from my own relationship. On the drive home, I didn't say anything. Neither did she. And somehow that silence felt worse than any argument we'd ever had. The breaking point came on a random Tuesday around 7:40 in the evening. No party, no crowd, no audience. Just me, her phone, and a message that popped up while she was in the shower. It wasn't even subtle. It was a photo from Marcus. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The preview alone was enough. Something in me finally snapped, but it wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, clear, like a switch flipping. I sat there on the edge of the bed, staring at that screen, and for the first time in 2 years, I asked myself a simple question I'd been avoiding. Why am I still here? Not why is she doing this? Not how do I fix it? Just why am I choosing this for myself? When Olivia came out of the bathroom, I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just told her I was done. She laughed at first, like she always did, like I didn't mean it. Then she realized I wasn't arguing, wasn't negotiating, wasn't trying to prove anything. I was just done, and suddenly she got angry. She called me dramatic, said I was throwing everything away over nothing, said no one else would put up with me the way she did. That line almost worked. I felt it hit something deep, that old belief that I wasn't enough, that I was lucky to have anyone at all. But for once, I didn't let it stick. I grabbed my keys, walked out, and didn't look back. The first few weeks after that were rough. I won't pretend they were. I kept replaying everything in my head, every moment I should have left earlier, every time I let something slide. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was embarrassment. It was realizing how long I had accepted being treated like I didn't matter. Rachel was the one who kept me grounded. She didn't say, "I told you so," even though she easily could have. She just reminded me over and over that I wasn't crazy for wanting basic respect. That helped more than I expected. A few months later, I met Hannah. It wasn't dramatic or instant. It was normal. We met at a small coffee shop around 10:20 in the morning, both waiting too long for bad espresso. She smiled at me, we started talking, and nothing felt forced. What hit me wasn't some overwhelming spark. It was the absence of anxiety. I didn't feel like I had to perform or shrink or prove anything. She asked questions and actually listened to the answers. When I spoke, she paid attention. That alone felt foreign. The first time we went out together, I caught myself bracing for something to go wrong, for some hidden angle or test. It never came. She was just kind, consistently. No games, no subtle digs, no moments designed to make me feel small. And that's when it really sank in how little I had valued myself before. Not because Hannah was perfect, but because she treated me like a person who mattered, and that shouldn't have felt revolutionary. I think about that night at Daniel's party sometimes, about how I stood there while everyone watched me get humiliated and still chose to stay. It's hard not to cringe at that version of myself. But I also get it now. I wasn't staying because I loved her that much. I was staying because I didn't think I deserved anything better. Walking away didn't just end that relationship. It forced me to confront that belief head on. And meeting someone like Hannah didn't fix me. It just showed me what I should have expected all along. Respect isn't something you earn by tolerating disrespect. It's the baseline. And the moment you start believing you deserve less than that, you're already losing. Olivia did not just cheat. She humiliated the writer in front of other people and then tried to make him feel foolish for reacting. That is a cruel kind of treatment because it attacks both the heart and the pride at the same time. But the writer's final walkaway mattered because it broke the habit of shrinking himself to keep someone else comfortable. He finally saw that being patient was not the same thing as being respected. And now the next story carries that same pain into a home full of family pressure, where the writer has to decide whether other people's voices matter more than his own peace. Let us read the next story together. The night I finally walked out, after letting her family convince me I was the problem. I found out she was cheating on me while her entire family was singing happy birthday in the next room, and somehow, I still ended up apologizing to her before the night was over. Her name was Alyssa, and if you met her you would think she was the kindest person alive. Soft voice, quick smile, always touching your arm like she really cared about what you were saying, and her family loved to remind me how lucky I was to have her, like they had personally handpicked her for me. It was around 8 in the evening when I stepped into the hallway to grab my jacket and saw her phone light up on the console table. A message from a guy named Jordan that read, "I miss you already," and my stomach dropped so fast it actually hurt. I should have walked away right then, but I didn't. I opened it, scrolled just enough to see photos and messages that made it obvious this wasn't some one-time mistake, and I remember just standing there frozen, while laughter from the dining room spilled into the hallway like nothing in my life had just shattered. When I walked back in, Alyssa saw my face immediately and her expression flickered for a second before she recovered and asked if I was okay, and instead of calling her out right there, I said we needed to talk. She followed me into the kitchen, closing the door behind her, and I showed her the phone without saying a word. For a split second she looked caught, then offended, then somehow hurt, like I had betrayed her by finding out. She told me I was invading her privacy, that Jordan was just a friend, that I was twisting things because I was insecure, and before I could even process it, her mother, Denise, walked in asking what was going on. Alyssa didn't hesitate. She told her mom that I had been going through her phone and accusing her of cheating, and Denise looked at me like I had just insulted their entire bloodline. Within minutes, her father, Richard, and her brother, Caleb, were in the room too, all staring at me, and suddenly I wasn't the guy who had just been cheated on. I was the unstable boyfriend causing a scene at a birthday dinner. I tried to explain. I told them about the messages, the photos, the way it clearly wasn't innocent. But Alyssa started crying, real tears, shaky voice, saying she couldn't believe I thought so little of her, and her mom wrapped an arm around her while telling me I needed to take a step back and think about what I was accusing her of. Richard told me that trust was the foundation of any relationship, and if I didn't have that, maybe I needed to work on myself. I remember standing there feeling like the ground had shifted under me, like I had somehow misread everything, and the worst part is I wanted to believe them, because the alternative meant accepting that the person I loved had been lying to me. By the time we went back into the dining room around 9:30, I was the one apologizing, saying I overreacted, saying I was stressed from work, and Alyssa squeezed my hand under the table like she was forgiving me. That should have been the moment I left, but instead it became the beginning of a pattern that almost broke me completely. Over the next year, things kept happening. Small at first, late-night texts she would hide, unexplained absences, stories that didn't quite line up, and every time I questioned it, she flipped it on me. She would say I was paranoid, that I was projecting, that I was trying to control her, and her family backed her every single time like a well-rehearsed defense team. Denise would call me to check in and somehow turn the conversation into a lecture about how relationships require trust. Caleb would joke about me being jealous, but not in a harmless way, more like planting the idea that I was the problem. Richard barely spoke to me anymore unless it was to remind me to treat his daughter right. And the messed up part is I started believing them. I started second-guessing my own instincts, convincing myself I was overthinking, that maybe I really was insecure. There was a night around 11 when I sat alone in my car outside my apartment, staring at my phone, debating whether to ask her where she really was, and I actually put the phone down because I didn't want to start another fight that would end with me apologizing again. The second time I caught her was worse because there was no ambiguity. I saw her with Jordan in person, outside a bar, the way she laughed, the way he touched her, the way she didn't pull away, and something in me snapped, but not in the way you would expect. I didn't confront them. I drove home, sat in silence, and waited for her to come back with whatever story she was going to tell. When she walked in around 1 a.m, she acted normal, kissed my cheek, asked why I was still up, and I just looked at her and said, "I saw you." There was a pause, just long enough for the truth to exist in the room, and then she started again, not denial this time, but justification. She said it wasn't what it looked like, that she was confused, that I had been distant, that she needed attention, and somehow by the end of the conversation, I was apologizing for not being enough. The next day her family called me again, not to ask what happened, but to tell me relationships are complicated, that people make mistakes, that if I really loved her, I would work through it. I stayed for months after that, each day feeling a little smaller, a little more unsure of myself, like I was losing pieces of who I used to be. The final breaking point didn't come from catching her again. It came from realizing I was scared to trust my own thoughts. It was around 6 p.m, quiet, no drama, no confrontation, just me sitting on the edge of the bed while she was in the shower, and I had this moment where I asked myself if I would ever feel secure with her, and the answer was so clearly no that it actually felt calm. When she came out, I told her I was done. No accusations, no yelling, just done. She tried everything, tears, anger, blame, even bringing up how her family would be disappointed in me. But for the first time, none of it worked because I wasn't trying to convince anyone anymore. I just wanted out. Walking away felt less like a dramatic escape and more like finally putting something down that I had been carrying for too long. The aftermath was messy. I won't pretend it wasn't. There were nights I questioned if I made a mistake, moments where I missed her or the version of her I thought she was, but slowly, piece by piece, I started to feel like myself again. Months later, I met Emily at a coffee shop around 10 a.m, nothing dramatic, just a normal conversation that didn't feel like a test. She listened without twisting my words, she laughed without making me feel small, and when she said something kind, it didn't come with a hidden condition. The first time I told her about my past, I was waiting for her to find a way to blame me for it, but she didn't. She just said that sounded really hard and I'm glad you got out. That simple sentence hit harder than anything Alyssa or her family had ever said to me, because it made me realize how much I had accepted as normal before. Being with Emily showed me that trust isn't something you have to be convinced into. It's something you feel without being told you are wrong for wanting it. Looking back, the worst part wasn't even the cheating. It was how easily I let myself be convinced that my pain wasn't valid. I stayed because I thought love meant enduring, but it doesn't, not like that. If there is anything I learned, it is that the moment you start doubting your own reality to keep someone else comfortable, you are already losing more than the relationship is worth, and walking away is not failure. It is the first honest thing you have probably done in a long time. Olivia's biggest cruelty was not only what she did, but how she made the writer feel wrong for reacting to it. That kind of treatment can wear a person down until he starts shrinking just to keep the peace, and the writer lived in that quiet pain far too long. But when he finally left, he stopped letting shame make the decisions for him. That mattered because he chose dignity over another round of being dismissed. And now the next story moves into something even more painful, where love is tested by distance, shock, and a betrayal that meets the writer at the worst possible moment. Let us read the next story together. I flew across the world to surprise my girlfriend and walked in on her cheating, and somehow I still gave her more chances. I was standing outside her apartment door at almost midnight, heart pounding like I was about to propose, not realizing I was about to watch my entire life fold in on itself. Her name was Chloe, and for the past year she had been everything to me, even from thousands of miles away. Voice notes, late-night calls, plans about closing the distance, all of it. I had spent weeks planning the surprise, saved up money, booked the flight without telling her, even coordinated with her friend Mia to make sure she would be home that night. I remember smiling like an idiot as I unlocked the building door Mia had buzzed open for me, thinking this was the kind of story people envied, the guy who flies across the world for love. The moment I reached Chloe's door, I could already hear music playing inside, low and slow, and I thought maybe she was just unwinding. I knocked once, then again, and when there was no answer, I tried the spare key she had mailed me months ago, just in case. The door opened, and everything in me dropped before I even fully processed what I was seeing. Chloe was on the couch with some guy I had never seen before, his shirt off, her legs tangled with his like I didn't exist. She looked up first, her face going from confusion to pure horror, and I just stood there frozen, suitcase still in my hand, like my body hadn't caught up to my brain. The guy scrambled up, muttering something, but I couldn't hear him over the ringing in my ears. I remember asking her, calm in a way that scared even me, "Who is that?" And she said his name was Daniel. Like that was supposed to mean anything to me. What broke me wasn't even just seeing it, it was how fast she switched into damage control, like she had practice. She said it wasn't what it looked like, then corrected herself because obviously it was exactly what it looked like, then started crying, saying she had been lonely, that the distance was hard, that she didn't think I would ever actually come. That last part hit harder than anything, like my commitment had been theoretical to her. I left that night and checked into a cheap hotel, sitting on the edge of the bed until sunrise, replaying everything we had ever said to each other, trying to figure out where I had been stupid. She called me non-stop, texts piling up, voice messages filled with apologies and promises, and by mid-morning she showed up at my hotel door, crying so hard she could barely talk. And here's the part I still struggle to admit: I let her in. I told myself it was because I needed closure, but really it was because I couldn't stand the idea of going back home alone after building my entire life around her. She swore it was a one-time mistake, that Daniel meant nothing, that she would do anything to fix it, and I believed her because believing her hurt less than accepting the truth. I stayed for the rest of the week, and somehow we pretended things were normal, going out to eat, holding hands, even laughing like I hadn't seen what I saw. When I flew back home, we told ourselves it was a reset, a second chance. For a while it felt like maybe we could actually make it work. She called more, checked in constantly, sent me pictures, reassured me in ways she never had before. But something had shifted in me. I started noticing every delayed reply, every vague explanation, every moment where her tone felt off. About 3 months later, the first crack showed again when she cancelled a call we had planned for almost midnight her time, saying she was exhausted. I didn't say anything, but something in my gut twisted the same way it had that night. The next day, I saw a tagged photo of her on social media at a bar she claimed she hadn't gone to. When I confronted her, she admitted she had gone out with friends but insisted it was harmless. Then came the trickle truth, a message from some guy named Marcus, flirting, nothing explicit but enough to make it clear she was keeping doors open. Again she cried, again she blamed the distance, again she promised it would never happen again. And again I stayed. Each time it happened, and it did happen more than once, the excuses got thinner but my tolerance somehow got thicker. I told myself love meant fighting, meant forgiving, meant understanding, but really it meant I was afraid of being alone after investing so much into her. My friends told me I was losing myself, and deep down I knew they were right, but I kept choosing her anyway. The lowest point came almost a year after that first night when I decided to visit again, not as a surprise this time but planned, and she seemed oddly hesitant about the dates. That should have been enough of a warning, but I ignored it. When I got there, things felt off immediately, like she was performing affection instead of feeling it. On the third night, I woke up around 3 a.m. and noticed her phone lighting up repeatedly. I wasn't proud of it, but I checked it, and what I saw made everything before look small. Messages from multiple guys, not just 1 or 2, full conversations, plans, pictures, things that made it clear I was just one option among many. I sat there in the dark, her breathing steady next to me, and something in me finally snapped, not in anger but in clarity. This wasn't a mistake or a phase or something distance caused. This was who she was choosing to be over and over again. When she woke up, I didn't yell, I didn't argue, I just told her I was done, and for the first time she looked genuinely scared, not of losing me as a person, but of losing the safety I provided. She tried everything again, tears, apologies, promises, but it all sounded hollow. I packed my things and left before noon, and that was the last time I ever saw Chloe. The aftermath was brutal, I won't lie. There were nights I questioned if I had made a mistake, if I should have tried harder, if maybe I had expected too much. But slowly, painfully, I started rebuilding my sense of self, figuring out what I actually deserved instead of what I was willing to tolerate. About a year later, I met Alina through a mutual friend, and the irony wasn't lost on me when I realized she lived even farther away than Chloe ever did. At first I was hesitant, almost paranoid, but Alina was different in ways that felt quiet and real instead of loud and convincing. She didn't overpromise, she just showed up consistently, calls when she said she would, honesty even when it was uncomfortable, no gaps I had to fill in with anxiety. We visited each other over time, and not once did I feel that gut-twisting doubt. The distance was still hard, but it wasn't an excuse, it was just a challenge we handled together. The biggest difference was I never had to beg for reassurance or question my place in her life. It took going through Chloe's cycle of betrayal to understand that love without trust is just prolonged pain, and no amount of history or loneliness is worth staying in something that keeps breaking you. Looking back now, the flight I thought was the start of my future was actually the moment I should have walked away for good, but I needed to learn that lesson the hard way. And as much as it hurt, it taught me something I'll never ignore again. The right person does not make you feel like distance is a reason to doubt them. They make you feel like distance is just temporary. The next story carries a deep kind of heartbreak because the writer crosses the world with hope in his hands and gets met with betrayal instead. That is the kind of pain that can shake a man's sense of what was real, because the effort was so large and the trust was so complete. But even after that shock, he keeps showing up for love until he finally sees that endurance is not the same thing as devotion. The real victory is not that he kept going, it is that he learned to stop when the pattern stayed ugly. And now we move into the next story, where isolation, control, and the slow loss of outside voices make the truth even harder to escape. Let us read the next story together. I was cut off from everyone for her, then I found out why. It hit me at 3 a.m. when my phone lit up with a name I had not seen in months, and I already knew I was not supposed to answer it because of her, but I did anyway, and that one decision cracked everything open. My name is Daniel, and by that point my world had shrunk to the size of a one-bedroom apartment I shared with Chloe, a place that smelled like stale takeout and her vanilla candles, a place where my friends no longer visited and my family stopped calling because I always had an excuse ready. Chloe said it was us against the world, that people were jealous, that they wanted to pull me away, and I believed her because loving her felt like oxygen and losing her felt like suffocating. When Marcus called me that night, I hesitated long enough for it to almost go to voicemail, but I picked up anyway and whispered like I was doing something illegal. He did not waste time, just said he had been trying to reach me for weeks and asked if I knew where Chloe was right then. And I told him she was at work, because that is what she told me before she left around 9 o'clock. And there was a long silence before he said he saw her at a bar across town with a guy named Ryan, and not in a casual way. My chest tightened, but I still defended her out of reflex, said he must be mistaken, said Chloe does not even like bars, and Marcus just sighed like he had expected that and said he had pictures. I remember sitting there staring at the dim light in our kitchen, while my heart pounded so hard it felt like it was trying to break out of me, and when the photos came through, I felt something inside me collapse quietly instead of shatter. There she was, unmistakably Chloe, laughing with her head thrown back, her hand on some guy's chest, and in the next picture they were kissing like I did not exist. I did not confront her right away, which I hate admitting now, but that is what toxic dependency does to you. It makes you negotiate with your own pain. I told myself there had to be an explanation, that Marcus could have misunderstood, that maybe it was old, anything to avoid the truth sitting right in my hand. When she got home around 2:30, she smelled like alcohol and something unfamiliar, and she smiled at me like nothing was wrong, kissed my cheek, asked why I was still up, and I said I could not sleep. I watched her move around the apartment like she owned every piece of me, and I realized I had no one to talk to about this, because she had slowly convinced me that everyone else was a threat. The next morning I asked her casually how work was, and she launched into a detailed story about a difficult customer and a long shift, and she told it so smoothly that for a second I almost believed it again, but then I showed her the photos and her entire face changed. She did not apologize, not at first. She got angry, asked who sent them, accused me of spying on her, said I was violating her privacy, and somehow I ended up apologizing for looking at proof of her cheating. That was the first time I realized how deep I was in it, but not deep enough to leave. She cried later, said she was lonely because I had been distant, said it meant nothing, said she loved me, and I accepted it because the alternative was losing the only person I had left. The weeks after that were worse because now I was hyper-aware of everything, every late shift, every text she hid, every time she turned her phone away from me, and I started to feel like I was losing my mind. I tried to reconnect with Marcus, but Chloe noticed and picked a fight so intense that I ended up blocking him again just to keep the peace. She would alternate between affection and cold distance, pulling me in just enough to keep me hooked, then pushing me away until I felt desperate to get her back. I stopped sleeping properly, stopped eating right, and at one point I even caught myself sitting alone in the dark just staring at nothing, wondering how I got here. The second time I caught her was not as dramatic, it was quieter and somehow worse. It was around 11 in the morning and she had left her laptop open on the couch, and I saw messages pop up from someone named Ethan, and I should have looked away, I know that, but I did not, and what I saw confirmed everything. It was not just physical, it was emotional, the kind of conversations she used to have with me, inside jokes, plans, things that made it clear I was just one of several options. When I confronted her this time, she did not even try to deny it for long. She just shrugged like it was inevitable and said maybe we were not meant to be exclusive, even though she was the one who demanded I cut everyone else off in the first place. That was the moment something shifted in me, not a dramatic explosion, but a quiet realization that I had given up my entire life for someone who did not value me at all. It still took me time to act on that realization because leaving meant facing the emptiness I had been avoiding, but I started small. I unblocked Marcus and called him, and I told him everything, and instead of saying I told you so, he just listened. That alone felt like a lifeline. I reached out to my sister, Emily, who I had not spoken to in months, and she cried when she heard my voice but welcomed me back without hesitation. Chloe noticed the change almost immediately and tried to tighten her grip, more affection, more promises, more guilt, but it did not work the same way anymore because I had seen too much. The final straw came one evening around 7 when she casually mentioned going out with coworkers, and I felt that familiar anxiety rise, but instead of questioning her or begging for reassurance, I just said okay and started packing a bag. She laughed at first, thought I was bluffing, but when she realized I was serious, she switched to anger, then tears, then threats, cycling through every tactic she had used before, and for the first time I did not fold. I walked out of that apartment with a single bag and a heart that felt both shattered and strangely lighter. The months after were not easy, I am not going to pretend they were, because rebuilding yourself after that kind of isolation is messy and slow, but I kept going. I reconnected with people, I went to therapy, I started figuring out who I was outside of that relationship, and it was uncomfortable but necessary. Then I met Sarah, and I was skeptical at first because I did not trust my own judgment anymore, but she was different in a way that felt steady instead of intense. She encouraged me to spend time with my friends, to maintain my independence, to have a life that did not revolve entirely around her, and at first that felt foreign, almost wrong, but over time it started to feel like what a relationship should actually be. There were no games, no manipulation, no isolation, just mutual respect and space to grow. One night around 10, we were sitting on her balcony talking about everything and nothing, and I realized I was not anxious. I was not waiting for something to go wrong. I was just there, present, and it hit me how different that felt from what I had before. Looking back now, I can see how I let myself get pulled into that cycle with Chloe, how I ignored the warning signs because I was afraid of being alone, but I also see how breaking out of it forced me to rebuild something healthier. The betrayal hurt more than I can fully explain, especially because it happened more than once, but it also pushed me to finally understand my own worth. If you had asked me back then, I would have said losing Chloe was the worst thing that could happen to me, but I know now that staying would have been so much worse. Chloe did not just cheat, she isolated the writer until even the truth felt hard to reach. And that is a deeply lonely kind of harm. The writer spent so long inside that closed circle that every outside voice had to be earned back one careful step at a time. But when the truth finally broke through, he chose to rebuild his life instead of hiding inside her version of it. That mattered because it proved he was never too far gone to come back to himself. And now we move into the final story, where betrayal happened in front of everyone, and the writer still had to find the strength to choose dignity over appearances. Let us read the next story together. I stayed after she cheated on me in front of everyone, and it nearly destroyed me before I finally chose myself. I found out the first time at exactly 10:15 at night, with 200 people watching and pretending not to. It was at Marcus and Jenna's engagement party, the kind of event where everyone is dressed like they are auditioning for a life they cannot afford, phones out, smiles locked in place. I was at the bar grabbing drinks when I saw my girlfriend Alyssa laughing too hard at something Daniel said, her hand resting on his chest in a way that felt wrong even from across the room. I remember thinking I was being paranoid, that social settings make everything look more intimate than it is, until she leaned in and kissed him like I did not exist. Not a mistake, not a peck, a full kiss that lasted long enough for conversations to die around them. Someone actually cleared their throat. I stood there holding 2 glasses like an idiot, feeling my face burn while people avoided eye contact with me. Marcus gave me this look like he wanted to step in but also did not want to make a scene. I wish he had, I wish anyone had. Instead I walked over, set the drinks down and said her name once. Alyssa turned, saw me, and for a split second I saw panic before it hardened into something colder. She said it was not what it looked like, which is the dumbest sentence anyone can say when it is exactly what it looks like. Daniel slipped away like a coward, and I stood there with her while the party resumed in that fake way people do when something ugly happens in public. That should have been the end. It should have been simple. But it was not, because everyone we knew cared more about how things looked than what they were. The next morning my phone was full of messages, not asking if I was okay, but telling me not to overreact, saying relationships are complicated, saying it would be embarrassing to break up over something that could be handled privately. Alyssa cried, apologized, blamed alcohol, blamed stress, blamed me for being distant, and somewhere in all of that noise I convinced myself staying was the mature choice. I told myself walking away would make me look weak, like I could not handle a rough patch. I chose the image over the truth, and that decision became a cage I locked myself in. At first things seemed better. She posted pictures of us constantly, captions about loyalty and growth, tagging me in everything so it looked like we were stronger than ever. People ate it up, comments about how we were relationship goals, how we handled adversity with grace. It made me sick, but I played along because it was easier than admitting I had been humiliated and then chose to stay. The second betrayal was quieter. It happened at around 11 in the morning on a Tuesday when she said she was at a work meeting. I had taken the day off and decided to surprise her with lunch. I walked into the cafe she claimed to be at and saw her sitting in the corner with a guy named Trevor, their hands intertwined on the table like it was the most natural thing in the world. There was no crowd this time, no audience, just me standing there realizing the first time had not been a mistake, it had been a pattern. I did not confront her immediately. I left, sat in my car, and stared at the steering wheel while my thoughts looped. When I finally asked her about it later, she did not even try very hard to deny it. She said she felt trapped by expectations, that our relationship had become more about appearances than feelings, which was true, but she used that truth as an excuse to keep lying. I should have ended it then. Instead, I doubled down because by that point our lives were so intertwined publicly that leaving felt like detonating a bomb. Our friends, our families, even our jobs were connected. With a couple people pointed to a stable. Admitting it was all fake felt like admitting I had been living a lie. So I stayed, and every time I stayed it got easier for her to betray me again. It turned into this cycle where she would cross a line, I would find out, she would cry and promise change, and then we would post another smiling photo like nothing had happened. I started losing track of who I was. I stopped seeing friends who knew the truth because their concern felt like judgment. I started drinking more, smoking Tsar late at night, just to quiet my thoughts, anything to avoid facing the fact that I was choosing this. The worst part was not even the cheating, it was the way I began to believe I deserved it because I had accepted it once. The midpoint, the moment everything shifted, came at exactly 6:30 in the evening about a year after that first party. We were at dinner with her parents, and her mom was going on about how proud she was of us, how we represented commitment in a world where everyone gives up too easily. I looked at Alyssa across the table and realized she was texting someone under the table, smiling at her phone in that same way I had seen a dozen times before. Something in me just snapped, not in a loud dramatic way, but in a quiet, final way. I saw the rest of my life laid out if I stayed, endless performances, endless betrayals, endless pretending. When we got back to her apartment, I did not argue, I did not ask questions, I just told her I was done. She laughed at first like I was bluffing, then she got angry, then she cried, cycling through the same script she always used. But this time I did not engage. I packed my things while she followed me around, saying I was throwing away everything we built, saying people would talk, saying I would regret it. And maybe people did talk, maybe they judged, but for the first time in a long time I felt something close to peace. The weeks after were brutal. I had to rebuild my life from scratch, reconnect with people I had pushed away, sit with the embarrassment I had tried so hard to avoid. But there was also this growing sense of self-respect that I had not felt in years. I started being honest, with myself and with others, about what had happened. Most people were more understanding than I expected. A few admitted they had always known something was off but did not know how to say it. The real turning point came months later when I met someone new. Her name was Rachel. There was no big dramatic introduction, no instant fireworks, just a normal conversation at a friend's small gathering around 9 in the evening. She was straightforward in a way that caught me off guard, asking real questions, listening to the answers, not performing for anyone. I told her about my past without dressing it up, expecting her to see it as baggage, but she did not. She saw it as something I had survived and learned from. Being with her felt different in the most basic ways. No games, no hidden messages, no need to prove anything to anyone else. It was quiet, honest, and consistent, which I had learned is what real loyalty looks like. The contrast made me realize just how much I had tolerated before. Looking back, the hardest part was not leaving Alyssa. It was admitting that I had stayed for the wrong reasons. Social pressure, image, fear of judgment, all of it kept me stuck in something that was slowly destroying me. Walking away did not fix everything overnight, but it gave me the chance to build something real, starting with my own self-respect. If there is one thing I learned, it is that protecting an image is never worth sacrificing your dignity, because eventually the truth shows up anyway, and by then you have already paid the price. When a person keeps accepting disrespect, the heart does not just ache, it starts to forget what peace feels like. These stories made one thing very clear, and it is that love without honesty becomes a burden, and staying in that burden too long can teach a man to doubt his own worth. But every writer in this compilation reached the same hard truth in the end, that walking away is not weakness when the other person has already made staying unbearable. That is the quiet victory here, not revenge, not drama, just the return of self-respect and the steady decision to stop handing your heart to people who keep dropping it. Take care of yourselves, establish those boundaries early, and sweet dreams, everyone.